I will never grow tired of that.
Okay, you guys, for these air ride switches though, we're going to use this project box, and we're just going to mount the switch plate on the front and cut it out for the switches, and this is going to go off and get wrapped in the same material that our seats are going to get wrapped in. And we're going to tuck this bad boy over on this side of the steering column. It'll be nice and neat, easy to get to. It should give us a very clean finish on this whole middle section of the interior here. But we gotta start with the switches because everything kind of branches off from there. So at this point, let's hack this guy up, get it mounted, and run some airlines.
Okay guys, so we're gonna cut this thing out now, and here's how we're gonna do it. So we've got our faceplate, and we know that the manual paddle valves, they mount inside of here, and then there's like these little tangs that stick up on the sides, these tabs. And the way that it works is that these tabs hold it in place as well as like kind of lock it from the back. The inner lip here rests on a part of the tab itself. So we got a few things to worry about then. So we can't just straight cut out the center, like use it as the exact size to cut the middle section. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna fasten down this little faceplate, and then we're gonna mark the inside, mark the outside, and then that'll give us kind of our wiggle room. We'll know like how big the faceplate is, so that when we cut up on this box into this area, we're not doing too much. So we want to still have like a face that this is gonna rest against, you know? Because if it was only open, or if it was only touching on the sides here where these fasteners are, I worry that there's just a little too much flex in that. So you really want to have it against something. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to offset it a little bit toward the bottom, because when you're sitting in the seat and looking at the dash, you're looking down. So with it being on the side of the steering wheel, you just want it like as much in your view as possible, because you're adjusting your ride height. And if you're screwing with switches when you're driving, you really want to make sure that it's there, accessible, and you can see it correctly, you know? So yeah, we're going to offset it a little bit down towards the bottom. So first step is we're just going to take a tape measure, figure out the center line, mark it, put the screws in, and then we'll go from there with cutting it out.
Kind of hard to guide.
That is a snug fit.
Probably a good thing though, you don't want your switches bouncing around on you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hold on. Make sure the orientation's the same for your fittings.
This isn't like a permanent install, but
Okay.
that's a good point. Yeah, because this one's upside down, I think. It's fine. We know that this part's cut out perfectly. So, there we go. Switches will go like that. Yeah.
So what's next?
Alright, well, the next step is to remove the crotch cooler vent. So there's like the baffle and it's got the pull lever that's kind of down by the knee. We got to take that out and move it. We're going to see about moving that up into the dash. I've got an open pocket right now, the one's closest to the door. So we're going to try and move it there. That way we can make room for this bad boy to fit down where that pull lever normally would be. It's kind of nice and down next to the steering wheel. So let's do that now. There we go. Not bad.
Oh, not bad at all.
Yeah, wrapping it's gonna be cool though.
That fit's actually really nice there.
Okay, game plan time. So, I finally, after staring at this thing for 10 minutes, got a game plan of how I want to do it. So, I know that accessing this thing is going to be really important, accessing the fasteners that hold it to the dash. You'd think that this is kind of a one and done as far as like installation goes, but this is a manual paddle valve. So the controller is mechanical. It's not an electronic piece, where if it was an electronic box, no big deal. You know, you install it once, it's up there, it stays there. There's really not a whole lot of messing around with it as far as troubleshooting goes. When you've got manual valves, yes, manual valves are said to be one of the most reliable systems you can have, but air leaks can happen, and if you need to try and troubleshoot stuff, you got to be able to get at the back of the valves. So it'd be really nice to just be able to have it drop down. So that's where I got an idea of putting a bracket in and having it offset a little bit to the back so that you can access the fasteners from the front of the paddle valves. So paddle valves will be set up here, and there's actually screws in the front so you don't have to screw on with trying to get to the back side. And the whole back side of this is going to have air lines coming out of it. So it's not going to be the easiest thing to get your hand up in there or a wrench to try and get at a nut on the back side of this thing. It sounds awful if you ever need to troubleshoot. And if you're troubleshooting, it's already frustrating enough, you don't need that thrown in there. So, one other touch that I'm going to do, I decided to use the 16 gauge steel that I've got as opposed to the next size, which is 1/8 inch. So that's quite the gap between those two sizes. I got nothing in between. But 16 gauge feels like it's going to be more than rigid enough. And I'm going to have that, this is going to be the plate that offsets it to the back, offsets, the fasteners will be accessible in the front. The whole, this controller box, whatever you want to call it, paddle valve box, is going to be tucked a little bit towards the back. And what I'm going to do is roll the front edge of it. Rolling the front edge is going to allow me to put an accent light right there and hide the front side of it so you're not sort of looking at the side of a light. Which would be distracting when you're driving down the road. So Osnium has these really neat little LED modules, and I think that's going to work good because they're only like 5 millimeters tall. So a rolled edge doesn't have to be huge. I'll put it at about 1/2 inch, I think. That'll compensate in case there's a taller adhesive on the back side of these LEDs. But what'll be great is then I can tuck that up there. It's blocked from my view, and I can throw a LED controller on it to control dimming. So that would be cool. That way if I'm driving down the road at night and I need to mess with the valves at all, I'm not accidentally hitting the wrong one. It's like you're gonna, you're driving down the road, you don't want any other distractions. You don't want it to be any harder to control these things. So anyway, I'm gonna grab the air shears and start cutting this thing up and putting some screws through this thing, get it fastened.
So I'm actually going to use nut certs in this, as much as I didn't want to. Because one trade-off is nut certs have a flange on them. So that flange stands whatever it's, you know, whatever you're trying to butt up against that surface. It stands it off maybe 1/16 of an inch. So I'm gonna need to make up that gap, more than likely. It's a tiny gap, but you don't want flex in something like this because you're, you know, controlling the switches with it. So I'll have to figure that out, but I'll put some kind of like a little gasket in there or something. But this still allows me to secure it from the front. All right, let's fit this thing. That actually looks really good.
Alright, so I think I'm just going to disassemble this now. That way I can get these guys ready for paint and bring this up to get upholstered. So I think what I'm going to do is just like a black vinyl upholstery on this thing. It's going to hide the holes. It's going to match the seats, so I'll be doing it in like a black with like a gray or silver, probably gray thread. So that should look pretty good with how I think how we're going to redo the seats in it. So, okay, let's do that. So I am super stoked about how this came out. So went ahead and I had the upholstery done. So my buddy Brody took care of this. So shout out to Brody. Thanks for for wrapping this thing. He works at a local upholstery shop here in town. Yeah, he whipped this thing up in no time. So it's pretty sweet. Nice little accenting stitcher on the outside. It's going to be probably the same color combination for the seats that I'm going to have done eventually. So it's kind of sweet. So I tossed the faceplate on so that it kind of gives you guys an idea of what it's going to look like. The cover that the metal piece that goes over the top is actually drying right now. It's got its first coat of primer on it, and then I'm going to splash some paint on here next. Hopefully that dries in time so that I can rivet this thing down and actually start installing this into the car. So this is an exciting point to be at, because this means now I can start actually plumbing the air suspension together, the air management. So next step is going to be, I got to splash a little bit of paint on that thing and let that dry. And then I think what I'm going to get started on right away here is setting up the switches, the paddle valves. Get those plugged into this thing, and then think about whether or not I can start doing some bench plumbing. So sometimes what people will do is, like, the way these valves work, there's a lot of T's that end up on the back side of it, so you can probably do some of this, some of the fittings actually at the bench. So I'm going to take a look at that and see if I can do that. Deliveries on the top, supplies on the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to start with the supply side. So this is cool. It's all mounted in there, snapped into place. They fit nice and snugly. So now we're going to start supplying air into the back side. So we'll start with the bottom. Bottom is the supply side. And in this case, what we have are some splitters. So these are kind of cool, just very basic little push to connect splitters. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of look at the flexibility of the line. That'll kind of give us an idea, because again, we've got to have these guys merging, and I don't want to make them too short, but I also don't want to make them too long because of just constraints in the amount of room we have in the back. But what's nice is, like, we can actually start plumbing this on the workbench. So important to kind of keep everything clean. Do nice cuts on everything. This cut looks perfect. That's where these cutting tools come in really handy. So I think what we'll do, we'll do a handful of these. Yeah, these actually, this is pretty flexible. So I think we can get away with having them pretty damn close. So what we'll do is we'll just start cutting these guys off at about the same length. I think the first one we'll just start with like a 3-inch tail. Let's move it. That's the first one. So one of the things that I talked about early on was that I wanted to have this thing lit up. It's not going to be like bright because you don't want it to like be distracting driving down the road, but it would be nice to have something as important as your air suspension subtly lit up so that you know where the paddles are. What I did was I picked up an LED module, and then I got a couple other like 50/50 LEDs. It's a type of the chip, I believe. So I get all of my LEDs through a company called Osmium. I've been going through these guys for ages, and I don't know, it's good quality. It's not as cheap as some of the stuff that you're gonna find on eBay, but it's way better quality. And my plan is to just tuck this in right between the fasteners on here. It's like that. What it's going to do is light up the paddles so you know where they're at. Now I also have a module, really simple little module. Technically it's an LED controller. It just has like different settings that you can do. I just bought it to dim it. Whopping $10. It'll dim the light a ton. So what I'm going to do, I've got to run and pick up a faceplate for my gauges. So I'm going to clamp this guy down on this metal bracket so that we can move on, let that stick and settle. And when I get back, I'll be able to attach this whole thing, I think. And I think we're going to get to install it and get the gauges in. And yeah, maybe we can actually start playing around with the air on the front of this thing. So anyway, let's hook this thing up. Super cool thing about these push-to-connects is you can get a Schrader valve attachment, or Schrader valve push-to-connect. So you can use the same kind of pump that the attachment, you know what you'd use to air up your tires, it's the same thing. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit. So we haven't put air to these bags yet, so I'm kind of excited to see how they inflate and just kind of how this thing works. Now it's not going to be a perfect system because of course you got to try and like hold the air pump, the air chuck to this thing, and then operate the paddle valves at the same time. So it's probably going to be like really clumsy. We'll see how this works. I'm going to connect this and then we're just going to try it out and see how it happens. Right. Supply is connected. Okay, let's see if we can get her up off the jack. So we got 80 psi up front. Now, should we air it down? So that's all the way down. Yeah. Yeah, she gets low. That's 100 psi. Yeah, it's pretty high. That's like a normal cruising height. Okay guys, that concludes part one of installing air management on our shoebox. We've got the paddle valve box all made, upholstered, installed, and the front end goes up and down, so that's awesome. We'll get the back end installed here next in part two, and that's where we're going to show you guys how we're doing the air compressor, the tank, and the lines. So right now we're literally running off of the air compressor and a Schrader valve from the garage. So let's make this thing control itself 100%. We'll do that in part two. So thanks for tuning in.